Welcome to Access Asia, I'm Yuka Hwaye. Coming up, why did they go there and what did they do? Investigators turned their focus to a trip to the Philippines by the Bondi Beach terrorist attack suspects. The country has long struggled with Islamist militancy on the southern island of Mindanao. Water starts receding in Indonesia's Sumatra island, where more than 1,000 people have died in devastating floods. But help is slow to come. Survivors are calling on the government to seek international support. Myanmar's military junta ramps up pressure on voters ahead of general elections as it seeks legitimacy amid a raging civil war. We'll get an expert analysis on the ongoing situation there. Police in Australia are investigating a trip to the Philippines made by Sajid and Naveed Akram, the suspects of a terrorist attack in Sydney that killed 15 people and injured dozens more. The father and son spent nearly a month on the island of Mindanao in the south of the country in November. No link has been established between their stay and the shooting spree, but attention has turned to the location, the region long known as a hotbed of Islamic extremism and separatist movements. France 24's Antonia Carrigan has been looking at the story. Hi, Antonia. So, according to ABC News, the suspects received militant-style training in Mindanao. Could you explain more about this?
Well, to give you a bit of context, they spent their time in the Philippines in the city of Davao. That's the capital of the southern island of Mindanao, which is a majority Muslim island in what is otherwise a majority Catholic country. Various groups there have been seeking independence for the island for decades, some purely separatist, some Marxist and some radical Islamist. Now, the country's insurgent Islamist groups pledged allegiance to the Islamic State in the 2010s, meaning the country had certainly then a serious Islamic State presence. And it all came to a head back in 2017 when groups besieged the city of Marawi, fending off US-backed Philippine soldiers, forces, for 5 whole months. They were in control of the city. Many of the militants at that time were foreign, not Filipino, supporting this image of Mindanao as something of a haven for jihadists from around the world, or certainly it appeared that way back then.
So against this backdrop, what does the Philippine government have to say about this trip by the gunmen?
Well, Manila were very unimpressed by the initial assertion of this militant-style training. Let's have a listen to a spokesperson for the Filipino president, shall we?
Of course, the president strongly rejects the sweeping statement and the misleading characterization of the Philippines as the ISIS training hotspot. Currently, there is no validated report or confirmation that the individuals involved in the Bondi Beach incident received any form of training in the Philippines.
Well, that indignation is about this characterization that they feel is completely outdated. They say, and they're right, the Philippines have slipped down the global terrorism index in recent years. These militias, they did feel the full force of a Duterte-led crackdown. And a 2020 law has allowed the prosecution of those even quite obliquely involved in terror activity, making it harder to fund, for instance, these groups. So even if there are still 300 to 500 Islamist militants active in the country, loyal to ISIS, they're much more fractured as a political and as a militant force, many of them on the run. Despite their initial indignation, the Philippine authorities are cooperating with the Australians ongoingly on this investigation, and some details have emerged. The 2 men, during their time in Davao, mostly stayed in their rooms, initially booked for 1 week and then extended their stay. They ended up being in the country for 28 days, so one wonders what they were waiting for, what they were hoping for, what they were doing there. One is known to have entered a firearms shop, and CCTV at one point in one location near the hotel has them going for what's being referred to as a jog walk. And there is a suggestion from an Australian investigator that this might have been some form of physical conditioning ahead of what happened at Bondi Beach. More will, of course, emerge. The answers that the investigators will be looking for were, why were they in Davao? Why were they there rather than elsewhere? What were they doing there that they couldn't have done in Australia? And how does it link to what happened then just 2 weeks after their return at Bondi Beach?
So it's a complex situation there. We'll await more details to come out. Well, Antonia Carrigan, thank you so much for all that. Moving on. Cleanup operations have begun in northern Indonesia, where 2 cyclones devastated 3 provinces last month. The death toll has topped 1,000, with more than 200 still missing. Aid delivery has been slow in many areas of Aceh, with hundreds of villages still being cut off from road transport. Survivors and volunteers are growing angry with the government's response, many calling on the authorities to bring in international help. Andrea Hillier has more.
Indonesian soldiers sift through the mud and wreckage of a regional hospital in Aceh province. 3 weeks after floods devastated the island of Sumatra, the cleanup operation is nowhere near over. Countless survivors, like Revi Rinaldi, lost their homes in the floodwaters. Now they're struggling to rebuild their lives.
So today, this food stand of mine has become a shelter for me and my family.
Revi says local communities need more help.
With the wide impact of this disaster, we residents are wondering why the government hasn't allowed more international aid in.
More than 1,000 people were killed in the flooding in Indonesia, and over 200 are still missing. Locals say the Indonesian government should accept offers of foreign assistance, but Jakarta insists it already has the necessary resources to respond. That doesn't convince survivors like Lia Minati. She's been living in this tent with her baby and her daughter ever since floods washed away her home.
My children don't really complain, but sometimes they ask, "Mom, when will we have a house again? It's cold here at night, Mom. During the day, it's hot and dusty."
Like them, other survivors are wondering whether they'll ever have homes to return to if the authorities don't step up their relief efforts.
People in Myanmar are being called to the polls as the country's military rulers organise elections starting on the 28th of December. The vote will take place in 3 phases and will be the first to be held since the 2021 coup d'etat. It may be an attempt by the junta to seek legitimacy, but the election is already being called a sham by international observers, including the United Nations. Many pro-democracy parties have either been barred or are refusing to take part in the polls, which will not be held nationwide amid a raging civil war. Well, for more, let's bring in Phil Robertson, Director of the Asian Human Rights and Labour Advocates, joining us from Bangkok, Thailand. Thank you for speaking to France 24.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Phil, few outside the Myanmar junta think that the election is going to be free or fair. What changes then will it bring to the country and to its people?
Well, look, people are thinking it will be neither free and fair with very good reason. The junta is going to hold an election in not even half of the country's constituencies, but they will elect a full national parliament that they will claim to represent everyone. I don't think any country in the world would accept that as a legitimate election. And as you've mentioned, many of the parties that won seats in the 2020 election, 90% of the votes, in fact, in the 2020 election, those parties are not permitted to run this election. So what we're looking at is an unserious, illegitimate election, an election that actually will result in 25% of the seats in the lower house and the upper house already being reserved for military officials outright. We'll see a shuffling of the chairs. Some of the military will take off their uniform to appear like they're civilians. The USDP, which will be the new ruling party, but they're the military. It's a charade. The leader of the junta, Senior General Min Aung Hlaing, he was told years ago by a soothsayer that it was his destiny to be president of Myanmar, and apparently he's doing whatever he can to achieve that. But the effort to sort of change their spots, to shed their skin and try to garner some sort of new international legitimacy with this election, I don't think it's going to work.
Meanwhile, the civil war, of course, wages on. A recent analysis show that the military has gained some ground, but still controls only about a fifth of the country. Many young people have been drafted into the army because of a new law as well, and millions have fled the country now. So who then can take part in the incoming elections?
Well, it's a very good point. In fact, much of the country is not going to have elections at all. This is part of the charade. It's a country in the middle of a bitter civil war with the people against the military. The military really has no popular legitimacy, and so people do not want to participate in this election. You know, there's a lot of cases where the military is trying to force people to vote. We've got college students who are registering for a new term of classes, they're forced to vote. We've had prisoners behind bars, they're forced to vote. Civil servants are forced to vote. People who are in contested areas where they want to receive humanitarian assistance, they say, well, if you vote in early voting, then maybe we'll give you something. You know, people are being compelled to vote because the junta thinks that the turnout equals legitimacy. But the bottom line is that this bitter civil war that we've talked about that has ruined the country, that has ruined the economy, it's the people against the military. And the one thing that these groups that are in opposition to the government are all in agreement about is that they will not accept the military in its current form in future politics of Myanmar.
Now, the ASEAN regional bloc has not been engaging seriously with Myanmar, while China has increased its influence. It's the regime's main supporter of arms, but it also has close ties with some rebel groups. What are we seeing here?
Well, the bottom line now, in the past year, China has really decided to throw its support behind the military junta. And I think that they consider that the least worst option. What China's all about is maintaining a degree of stability for their economic investments and economic engagement with Myanmar. And they're using their economic and political muscle against some of the ethnic groups like the Kokang, the Kachin, Taang, and others who have the unfortunate fate of sharing a geography, particularly a border with China. So they're susceptible to serious pressure and blockades from the China side. So what we've seen is China moving towards the junta. But the bottom line is that most people on both sides of the divide don't really trust China's intentions. And that is why, there's still a hope that ASEAN will be able to do something. As the transition of the chairmanship from ASEAN from Malaysia to the Philippines happens at the end of the year, there's a lot of hope that Manila will somehow step up and find a way to create some sort of momentum at the international side to offset, China's increasing influence backing the military junta.
Well, Phil Robertson from the Asia Human Rights and Labour Advocates, thank you so much for your analysis.
Thank you.
And that's it from us for Access Asia this week. Thanks for watching and see you next time.